Welcome to Talk Tennis. Today's guest has such an interesting story and a perspective on the sport. And I normally write out these long intros, but I think it would be best if he introduces himself. So Tim Foley, thank you so much for joining me and welcome to the podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
However, icebreaker, I want to do an icebreaker question to kind of throw it together, because I think this can reel in some listeners and kind of show what kind of thinking that you do when you're on the court and talking about tennis. And this question has been perplexed in my head every time I've stepped on the court the last couple of weeks. But do you remember the exact moment when you learned how to recover or move your feet correctly on the court?
I'm still trying to figure it out.
I feel like that is something for me where I was pulled out wide the other day and I recovered. I'm I can't even pinpoint ever practicing this.
Yeah, no, I don't. It's because it's never the same. It's never the same thing twice. I mean, in a regard, we spend, we've talked about this, you and I, but we spend a lot of time, it seems to me, trying to memorize the game. Right.
And that's what I was hoping. This can kind of just kick off kind of a conversation about your perspective. And it's so different than so many people right now who are trying to coach or teach this sport.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's such a big topic. You don't really know where to start. But, the idea, it starts with can you memorize tennis?
Yeah.
It's never the same thing twice, And so we're sort of prescribing these ways of going about the game. You have to hold the racket this way or swing this way or move your feet this way. And then it's never the same thing twice.
Yes.
And you're never the same person twice. I mean, you're always going through different stresses on the court. And so the idea is what you and I have been talking about is that I think we don't struggle because we don't know the right way to do it. We struggle because we believe there is one.
Right.
And so we're always dislocated from that. We're always thinking that we're never happy that the ball went in. It's it could have been better.
Oh no. See, okay. That's just a little bite-size amuse-bouche appetizer for our listeners, because that's what we're going to get into. But I just wanted to be able to explain kind of the conversations that we've been having, and that's it. And now, before we get into a deep dive of that concept and get out of my head, please. Now I'm going to have you introduce yourself and kind of even how do you even know about Tennis Warehouse? What's your story? When did tennis become part of your life? Just give us the full background.
Yeah, well, in a nutshell, in a very big nutshell, I've been pretty much playing the game my whole life. And I played in college. I played in junior college and I played in college. I played some pro ball. I wasn't very good at that, really. There's nothing to talk about there. And in the course of living in San Luis Obispo after college, I met Mark Skibecki.
Yes.
And we played
for
tennis.
Our listeners, they may or may not know, is one of the owners of Tennis Warehouse.
Yeah, so Mark and Drew. And so I met Mark and we played a ton of tennis. He's super fun to play tennis with. He's an excellent tennis player. Yes. We played a ton of doubles and we were really a good team because that guy can volley.
Yes.
I mean, he you get to the net, he volleys every now and again. I'd run into a return and we were a pretty good team. And I really enjoy him as a person. I love playing with him. He's super fair. He's super honest. And he's just a fun guy to be with. And through Mark, I met Drew. And this was before the Tennis Warehouse was the Tennis Warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
So I met Drew and he was just starting out. He had just bought a small tennis shop and he and Mark were working together. And so I got to know Drew. And he's also, a great guy. I mean, I like them both a ton.
Yeah.
And then, periodically I would check in as I was moving around. I'd check in and see him. And this thing, I mean, look where we are here. But it was growing slowly along the way. And you could see it happening, what was going to happen. And now it's hard to imagine what they've done here.
Yeah.
And when you talk to them about it, they pull it, they'll say, oh, shucks, just right place, right time. There were, there were a ton of people in the right place at the right time.
Right.
Drew and Mark saw it so early. And it's hard to explain this now, I think, to some of the younger people, but when the internet was starting, nobody believed you could sell stuff over it.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's set up to share. It's not set up to be protective. And so credit card protection was a problem. Security was a problem. And everybody was, they were selling rackets for pretty cheap, and everybody's really mad about that. And they said, oh, this internet thing's a flash in the pan. It's going to go away, but they knew it. I mean, they were right on it. Incredibly smart. Yeah. And so, so I came back after my trip, and, we sort of reconnected again. It's been a few years, and they're just the same people. I mean, really, we're all a little bit older, a lot older, whatever. Right? But I mean, they're the same, they're great guys. I really.
Yeah. Super down to earth. Mark's one of the most compassionate and giving people, I think. And that's really cool when you have an owner he gives back so much. And Drew is just like brilliant and smart. And yes. So that's like a whole episode on its own.
Right. It really is. Yeah. I mean.
But and for our listeners, Tim was introduced to me by Drew, who was like, you should probably meet this guy. Like, I feel like you might have something to talk about. He might be of interest. And I was kind of like, okay.
You're like, whatever, man.
Well, and like Drew, doesn't always listen to podcasts anyways. And he's like, oh, it'd be such a good podcast for you guys. So there's like all these kind of not weird, but like ironic, and like you have like all these like ins to tennis, and like your story goes in all these directions, and you met these guys and now you're back with these guys. And It's just a very cool, multifaceted story, because then you also have had these amazing life experiences, and tennis seems like it's always been a big part of your life, your passion, your heart, all of the above. So maybe you can go. And then also you were designing things, you were creating things in the industry. So keep going.
Yeah. Well, I was an early vendor to the Tennis Warehouse. We had a small apparel company. And so this was back in the day. I don't think you remember this time, but we had a lot of boutique brands in tennis. There was Tail, and it was a much bigger one, but Love 40 and Baldermatch. Yeah. And so we were one of these little boutique brands, and we were selling to Mark and Drew. And so, back to the tennis theme for a second, like, it seems, so this has been my story. Every time I go the tennis direction, things work out. It's just,
I like hearing that, because I've had a very similar life path where, like, I don't know about you, but like I've had people tell me like, no, you cannot work in tennis your whole life. Like, I had someone literally tell me, you cannot find a job in an industry where it's someone's hobby. I've probably mentioned that before on the podcast. I'm like, watch me.
Right. No, it's really very true. So life is this sort of a non-linear thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not sort of, it's an extremely non-linear thing. And people are thinking linear terms, and they say, oh, it's people's avocation. You can't make a living in this. But of course you can. I mean, when you're following what feels right to you.
Passion, man.
We had the apparel business. That was a business, and it really wasn't fun. I mean, we did okay, but it really wasn't fun. And when I would steer out of that into tennis, I was much happier, and things just fell into place much more easily for me. And it's always been that way. I mean, it just always has.
And you're back here. And like, I feel like this episode already feels like scattered, but like, I never even know how to, like, when I am trying to like introduce you to someone that I think would be someone relevant, I'm like, okay, here's Tim. He's done this, he's done that, he's done this, and then this, and then this. And there's just like so many pieces.
You're welcome to the inside of my brain. It's like,
so like it feels on par to feel like this episode might jump around, and hopefully for the people listening that like resonate with stories like this, they'll be right on track and enjoy. I want you to talk a little bit about your kind of life-changing experience that happened with your wife.
Yeah. Okay. So basically we woke up one night. I woke up one night, and my wife, she was 39 years old at the time. This is it was 8 years ago, I'd say. She's lying unconscious on the floor, and her eyes are just fixed like a doll's, right? And her neck was just throbbing. And it's very hard to describe what that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
the kids, we have three kids, and the kids are there and they're like, what's going on? And while we're sitting there trying to figure it out, which honestly in my memory feels like it took us an hour to figure out, but it's probably just about a minute. The throbbing in her heart stopped and she started turning blue. And I have to tell you, that moment was it was the most terrifying, most alone moment in my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
So, we called 911. I started CPR, and now at least I knew what to do. There was no pulse,
Yeah.
So we started CPR, and the 911 operator stays on the phone with me. And we lived, away from civilization, and it took them about 11 minutes to get to us. And so, solo CPR for 11 minutes is, it's very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like the movies, where you just kind of go like this. I mean, it's really like a full body thing. So the paramedics come and they take over and they put the paddles of the defibrillator on her and nothing changes.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes on like this for a little bit. And so afterwards they load her up in the ambulance and they take her to the hospital. In my mind, it was over. There's just no way. It must have been 15, 16 minutes. I don't know at this point, right?
Yeah.
But it was so bad that when you have one of these events, I've learned everybody shows up. All the emergency vehicles show up. The sheriff shows up, the ambulance, the fire trucks, everybody's there.
Mm-hmm.
It was so grave, the situation, that when everybody left, the sheriff turned around and gave me a hug. I can promise you, no sheriff has ever hugged me in my life. So, I was certain that in my mind, I had already shifted over to basically funeral planning. And so the kids were like 11 and 10 and 5, I think. And so I really delayed going to the hospital as long as I could.
Yeah.
Cleaned up. And then we pull into the hospital and I was trying to prepare the kids, I mean, you just said it's not going to be good. I told them. And then I was trying to prepare myself not to completely fall apart, right in the middle of the place. And so we go inside and a lady comes running around the counter. I think we talked about it. I assumed it was about the billing.
Yeah.
Right? And so she comes running around the counter and I get out my insurance card and she says, no, your wife's heart's beating again. Right? It just started out of nowhere. And she said, look, she's still very sick, but she's alive, and then you start to think like, you have, I have anyway, these terrible thoughts like, did I do the right thing? If she comes out, with brain damage or something, like,
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you another thought that came to me was that I did it for me. Yeah. I never thought for a moment if that's what she wanted, which is it's a weird thought, but anyway. So she was fine. She really was, there was no lasting effects. I mean, it's amazing, wow. Right? It's really amazing. So subsequent to that, so there were some other issues and she subsequently had a minor heart attack after this. And, there was a lot of things going on. And it took about a year for her to get, back up fully healthy. But she was back home within a few weeks and living a normal life. It just took a year to stabilize everything. But in the course of that time, we started to think about life a lot. And for me, those moments, like another thing that I've learned from other people who have been through this kind of a thing is that the people who die, it's actually a little bit easier for them. Because she didn't have any memory of it. She just remembered going to bed and then she woke up in the hospital with a couple busted ribs.
Yeah.
Like, ouch, like what? But in that period of time, for me, my entire life narrative was exposed as a fraud, right? I had a custom house, I had money, I had cars, I had things, all the things that I thought would make me safe, right? But you can't bribe the Reaper.
Yeah.
Right? I'm in there and I really, as I'm giving CPR, I was thinking to myself, you're such a fool. You just, we all talk about, we all say, right, that, oh, I know life's short. I know I'm going to die. But then if you ask them, do you think you're going to die today? No. Why?
Yeah.
Right? That's exactly the way I was. But when I left that, after that experience, I now think every day, there's no promises.
Right.
Every day is the oldest we've ever been. It brings with it the greatest chance we've ever had of dying. And we just put it out of our minds and go about doing our thing. So in that period of time, we sort of came up with this plan to do something different. So we got rid of the house, we got rid of all the stuff, which was really hard to do. But it was very psychologically hard to unravel all that we built, and we sold the house, and we came up with a plan to move into a camper and then travel around for a little bit and just see what happened. I think I did tell you this, that we spent the last night in our house and it was completely emptied out. And the last day was like this complete mad dash to get rid of everything, because you think people are going to want your stuff, but they really don't want it. But we're just like begging people. I was thinking, we had this big couch, and I thought, oh, we'll get like, a couple grand for the couch. I had to give it away.
Yeah.
And it was all at the last minute. So we finally get everything out. We're laying in this big room that we'd spent so much time in, watching movies and cooking. Is this very cool room with a fireplace, and we're all just sleeping on the ground. Everybody's asleep. We're leaving the next day. And I thought to myself, oh my God, you have totally ruined everybody's life right now. I was like so sure I ruined everybody's life. I couldn't sleep. It was terrifying. I was absolutely terrified. And so we pulled out of town with one rule, and that was we can't talk about change for 6 months. Because going from, this big life to this, what I thought would be a little life, is such a tectonic shift that it's going to come with all kinds of problems. And so, you just have to give it time to settle in. But I'm telling you, within like 3 weeks, everyone knew it was the right thing.
Yeah.
Everyone was happier, different. Like, it wasn't a small life at all, right? It was we were in huge, wide open spaces, and everybody was happier, really, and doing different things. And we never had the 6 month talk.
Just kept going.
Yeah, we really just kept going. And so from there, we drove to Mexico. Then everyone assured me that, well, that's fatal. You can't take your family to Mexico. You're totally irresponsible. That was great. We had a great time in Mexico. And we, at the end of our visa, we were down in southern Mexico. Let's go to Guatemala. And it just kept going like this. And then ultimately we drove the Pan American Highway all the way to southern Chile. I wish I could do it again. I mean, I wish I could have not just do it again, but start again without knowing, because it was really that much fun.
Well, and then just like that whole experience, I'm curious if you can pinpoint that, like, before you had a different outlook on life and then after your outlook changed, or you've always been very philosophical is too broad of a word, but like you obviously definitely have more of a like, let's take a look at what's really going on, instead of like it doesn't ever seem like you're quick to jump to a conclusion. You're like, okay, this is happening because XYZ, or like, I'm feeling this because, and do you feel like this life changed the way you saw life, changed the way you saw tennis, changed the way you saw parenting, I would assume, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's really true. So really what screwed me up the most was having kids.
Oh no.
When it was just me, I would, just sort of live my life. I didn't really worry about it.
Right.
And I never had a bunch of stuff. I lived out of a bag most of the time, just from playing tennis. And it was a lifestyle that I really enjoyed, just kind of wandering around doing stuff and teaching, But when you have kids, you start to think, is that fair for children? And so I didn't know anything about children. And I would ask people like, what happens when, and and they would say things, oh, kids need a schedule and they need these things and they have to be this way. And so not knowing, I listened. And then I found myself in this big mess where I have this huge house and all this debt. I'm in debt for 27 years now. So, that was my mortgage, right? And so I was really of two worlds, right, at that moment when it happened. And I don't think I told you this, but as it was progressing, I ended up in the hospital. I got really sick. And part of me was trying to hold on to these things, right? It was like, I was like, you spent so much time doing this. You got to hold on and make it right. And there was another part of me that wanted to let it all go.
Yeah.
All of it. Right. And it was like this battle going on in my head. I thought it was in my head, but then I started to get these serious abdominal pains. I was pretty sick. I didn't get out of bed for a few days. I lost a bunch of weight, and so people were starting to worry, and I felt very nauseous. and then it would come and it would go. And finally, I promised my wife, I said, okay, if it happens again, I'll go to the emergency room. So it did happen. I go to the emergency room, and I mean, in tremendous pain, really a lot of pain. So much pain, they gave me a narcotic, right? Which, by the way, was very good. So it was really an awesome experience. And then they take me in for a scan, and there's nothing.
Stress,
you know?
stress,
Yeah,
man.
well, we talk about these things, you know, especially in our profession, right? We talk about these things being in your head.
Yes.
And I don't think we give that the service that it deserves, because it may be in your head, but it's as real as it could be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first thing you came. And I asked him, I said, you know, you're telling me this is psychosomatic. And he said, well, I'm not telling you that, but I'm telling you there's nothing wrong where you're telling me there's something wrong.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, so your story is so cool, but like, then there's just so many adjacent, like tennis adjacent ways that we can go with this, because all of a sudden we're seeing players dealing with mental health, I'm putting quote unquote, or we all know Mardy Fish's story where he was in this extreme stressful situation, or his body was reacting with stress and anxiety, or his mind was reacting with stress and anxiety. And then it began to impact his performance physically and stuff like that. So
for me, in this case, I made a decision, right? We finally, I just got to this point. I made a decision. We're going to do it. We're going to do this trip. We're going to do this thing. And it went away.
Probably like immediately.
Pretty quickly it went away. And I'm not, and so like, this is all retrospective, looking back over it. It wasn't that clear to me at the time. And I'm not even sure that was really the case, you know, but it's just what it feels like to me, because when we finally made the decision, we had a course of action, it went away. And, you know, we see, look, when we talk about tennis as a game, all right, games are fun. Games, I believe the origin of games is self-discovery. But when we talk about tennis now, and when we talk about tennis at the upper levels of the game, right, that informs the lower levels, I believe.
Yeah.
And so at the upper levels, we're talking about, you know, grinding out matches, you know, bringing your lunch pail to the court, working points, right? There's no fun. There's no fun in the game. And we're always obsessed with the better players, right? But at the recreational level, which is 99.999% of tennis, also people aren't having fun.
Yeah. I was going to say the first time we hit, actually, there was something that you said that I was kind of like, he's right. And I remember we were talking and I was like, I just want to hit. I just like to hit. And you're like, I'm up for whatever. And then, so I was talking to you and I said, yeah, you know, I'm just one of those players. I just like to practice all day. I just want to hit. And you're like, that's because it's fun for you. You're not training for a tournament. You're not training to be a pro. You're not training for anything. You have fun hitting the ball. That's why you like to hit. That's great. Have fun with it. Like, you know, stop, you know, and I could tell you didn't say this, but it was kind of like, why are you getting mad because you missed a forehand? Or kind of like, why are you getting mad at yourself because your feet weren't in perfect position on that single ball?
No, I think, and we drive ourselves crazy. We really do. You know, we're never happy. The ball goes in, that wasn't good enough. It's, you know, and it's just because it's the culture of improvement. You know, I mean, everything's supposed to be getting better all the time. It's like productivity porn. You know, it's like, oh, if you know, I mean, fun is not acceptable anymore. You know, and I'm not saying frivolous fun or like, you know, the culture of happiness. I'm saying fun. You know, I mean, that moment in my life when I had to go through the CPR, okay, that was as important to me as anything. Life, you know, is not always happy and fun. That changed my life. It was a huge moment for me, but it was excruciatingly painful. You have to balance that out with something, right? And if you take all the fun out, there's nothing left. And, you know, it's like you're talking about playing matches and, oh, if I don't win, I'm a failure. I mean, who really freaking cares, right?
Who cares, you guys? Who cares?
Out there hitting balls, we're running around, we're, you know, and it's fun to play matches because it's just another way of hitting the ball, like keeping score and giving each other a hard time. I mean, it's unless you take it very seriously, right? And I think that's the trap we've fallen into, you know. And if you could show yourself right now, if you could take your game that you have and show it to your 10-year-old self, you'd be thrilled. Right? But you're not happy with it.
No, of course not. I know. It's ridiculous.
It's like getting on a bus that never gets anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, this idea of improving all the time. And it means that we're constantly working on our game. We're never enjoying it. And that means we're never done. Right. And I ask people all the time, do you work on walking? No, you've got it. You know how to walk. You don't think about it. And now you walk to do other things. I mean, it's not really that hard to hit a tennis ball.
Mm-hmm.
You've got it. You know how to do it. There's nothing to think about. Now you can get on with the playing of the game.
Yeah.
But nobody does.
No. Well, and that could lead straight into like, I would love for you to give kind of an overview and perspective of like your coaching, like quote unquote philosophy, because you even told me a story how like someone called you up and was like, hey, we'd love to have you join our team, coach this guy. And you were like, cool, great, I can do it remote. And they're like, yeah, no.
Right. Yeah. So like, I mean, you know, to be very brief about the whole thing, it started when I was questioning life. Right. So there's a life narrative about things and responsibility and all this stuff. And so I was pretty much tackling that head on. And you find out how untrue many of these stories you've been navigating by are. And then it just seemed to me that, well, that was like the evolution of the idea was it's true all the way down through my profession, through coaching too.
Yeah.
Right. And when we're instructing people, we don't even think about how people learn. So when I'm talking to my colleagues, we'll talk and say like, okay, so how does somebody learn?
Mm-hmm.
You know that nobody knows how we learn, right? Nobody really knows this. We have maybe 80 or 90 billion neurons, and between those, there's maybe 100 trillion connections. And at each connection, there's maybe 1,000 proteins in different strengths, right? Mm-hmm. And if we could take a video of your brain, we can't, but if we could, as you learn, mm-hmm. it would only be useful to you because no two brains are the same.
Right.
So how can we say we're teaching if we don't really know how people learn, right? And really, there's nobody who has this pinned down. Okay, so meanwhile, we have, you know, what we could call the physical side of tennis is skill acquisition.
Right.
Right. So we have basically for a long time we had one model, which was the information processing model, which it all happens inside of you. Mm-hmm. Now you and I have been down this road more than most people hitting balls, and we know that something's not there, that it's just not all inside of us, right? And what we believe is, or at least I should personalize this. What I believe is that they were saying like, okay, so here's this great player, he memorized the game, but you didn't, so therefore you're not talented. I believe that, you know, I'm not talented enough. That's a very limiting idea when you think about that. You know, it's not all happening in here. Where's it all happening? And I stumbled across, as I was, you know, thinking about this, I stumbled across this other field of thought called ecological dynamics. And in this school, the brain is not a store of information. It's like a radio. It tunes into information. This makes a ton of sense to me. Your experience with the game is personal, and it's you fine-tuning the information that on any given day. The wind, the sun, the different player, the court surface, the conditions are always different.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating concept to me. It just says so much about, because just to take a step backwards from there, if you take any 20 kids and you put them on a court and you let them hit for an hour, mm-hmm. don't give them any instruction, you'll see them all gravitate towards the same motions automatically. Not all, you know, exactly the same, but you'll see them all start to do the same. Where does that come from? So then if we're not teaching people how to hit, how to do things, what do we do, right? What would we do in an ecological dynamic situation? Mm-hmm. And this is where we've been talking about, you know, creating information-rich environments so that people can learn the game faster. Keep the learning curve steep. You know, that's what drills are about, is maximizing the reps per minute. Mm-hmm. So we design these information-rich environments where they can speed through, but not reps, iterations. And so, you know, I'm always encouraging people to show me as many different ways as you can hit a forehand. Totally explore it. Mm-hmm. We take right and wrong off the table, totally explore it and see what you come up with.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, people find it. They find it, you know, and so this gave me this idea that I don't think you and I have talked about this, but it gave me this idea that, because I consider I consider tennis people's art. I consider a tennis player an artist, and they're creating as they go along. And so I consider now an instructor not somebody who gives you information, or my role, I should say, is not somebody to give you information that I have and you don't, but it's to protect your creativity.
Yeah. That's
right? Because the moment I tell you how to do something, you're no longer creative. You're copying.
well, and that brings
Right.
up something when we were hitting, and I have always been told if you're going to miss, you miss long. And you were told the opposite. If you're going to miss, you're going to miss in the net. And just even that belief right there, my whole life, I have always said, if I'm going to miss, I'm going to miss long. If I miss in the net, that's stupid. I should never have done that. Why would I ever miss in the net? And like even just something so simple like that. If that was removed from my brain,
Yeah, no, it's really, when somebody says to you, a student says, how do I do this? How do I hit a second serve in the box? And then, you give them this detail, oh, your elbow has to be here and we have to do this, the back scratch. Then what is the next question every single time? Did I do it right? They don't even look to see if the ball went in the box anymore, right? They now need to do it the right way. There's an intermediary in between them and what they want to do, and they'll never get over it. They will never get over that.
one of my favorite things that I keep telling, I'm working with this 11-year-old girl and she's very petite, small. Her ground strokes are awesome, very well developed, which I think at this age, that's what a lot of coaches, teachers, pros focus on. You bring her up to the net and she's just not as comfortable. The racket's wobbling in her hand. She doesn't have the strength to hold straight. So of course I'm like, well, let's swing. Let's hit swinging
Right.
volleys. And
Yeah.
she's just mashing the ball, like amazing, like killing the ball with these swinging volleys. And I said, okay, if you ever go to another coach and they say, why are you doing this? You can say, because I'm good at it. Like, this is fun. This is how I like to hit the ball. It goes in. Like, why do we have a problem with like, she's not traditionally hitting a punch volley with one hand, but she's making the ball. She's having fun as she's hitting it. She sees no problem with a swinging volley. You know what I mean?
No, I do. It's the belief in right and wrong ways, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. And furthermore, you see these, even very good players. I get the feeling they're not playing the game, that it's like a recital, that you're just going through the motions of doing the swings. But if you turn somebody loose and you explain the game to them first, and then you say, now go play, they come up with all sorts of creative ways of doing this. Right.
It doesn't have to just be 2 balls to the forehand, 1 to the backhand, 2 to the forehand, 1 to the backhand. It can look different.
Yeah, or where they stand, or they come to the net, or they do all kinds of different things, and you get to watch them, and then you ask them, like, okay, so what's it feel like? What's going on? What do where do you want to be? Because it's their game. It's their game. It's their art. You can't. There's no right way to make art.
Well, and I can't believe like we've already been talking. This is what happens every time we have a conversation. It's like, okay, an hour later, okay. So I guess I just really wanted our audience to kind of like hear the basis, because for some people it is a very like different thought, especially when you are trying to learn tennis, or if you've never experienced this kind of thinking. It can feel like uncomfortable to like be outside of the like, well, your technique has to be just right. So I think these are really fun conversations, and I think our audience would really resonate with it and appreciate it. So I just kind of wanted to give like an introduction to thoughts. So if there's anything more that we should say before kind of wrapping this one, and then like being able to dive deeper into some cognitive thinking in another episode. Oh my gosh. I'm a philosophy degree person, so sometimes my brain's just like
it's a mental, everything's mental, isn't it? I mean, really, it's all it. So beyond all this other stuff, it's mind. It always boils down to mind. It's always you dealing with your mind. That's what, everything we've talked about here. The common thread is me, as going through with what happened to my wife, the stress of doing things, raising our children a different way. It was always mind.
Yeah.
It's once our basic problems are solved, food and shelter, right? Mm-hmm. We solve all of our problems externally. Have you ever had that thought? It's like we're always exercising our demons outside, right? But they're ours, right? We're projecting them to other people. Yeah, I think of my eyes more of projectors than receivers. And you look around and you see somebody's angry. That's probably not necessarily the case.
Well, and something that always sticks with me too is like your emotions and what you're feeling is what you allow rather than what someone has caused you to feel. It's how you're interpreting this. And like this also for anyone listening that's like goes way back in tennis, like there's so many mind F's. Like we as tennis players, there's so many things where I'm like, holy crap, that's coming up because when I was this age, I was told this and that. And it's like, I gotta, and you've said this, and it's like, you gotta kind of just flip the switch and be like, I'm going to release this thought. We're going to change our patterns. And like, that's also such a huge part of this is such like a bigger conversation than just tennis.
Well, no, but I think you're right. And it's really interesting. So going back to the person who thought that you couldn't be taught online.
Yes.
So the idea to me is that since games are about self-discovery, the masters of a game, the master of a game is someone who has mastered themselves. That's what we're talking about. So, Roger Federer, clearly, I don't know anything about this guy, but it looks to me like he's completely mastered himself.
Yeah.
Now, you could do it at, say, 40 years old, but you're not going to be Roger Federer because, time's not on your side. You're just, but so when you're what we're talking about is questions of self-mastery, not how to hit a tennis ball.
Right.
And these are things where like, there's no advice. I don't know what's best for you. I barely know what's best for me. To say that I know what's best for you to prescribe things, to direct somebody in a certain direction, I think is inappropriate and inaccurate. It's the questions you ask people. And so you look at somebody like this and they tell you what's going on. I mean, I can remember being so nervous in a match, I could barely hold my racket. Like just a basic forehand would be like, oh, like what is that? I mean, it's a game. I've hit 1 billion forehands in my life and suddenly this one's difficult, right? And so you hear these stories and the question is like, okay, what's stopping you? It takes a long time to figure that out. You keep reading. So the person wants out, I think, right? They want out. They want to buy a solution. Can you sell me a solution? Oh, a new forehand grip.
Exactly.
Or this or that. But you keep directing them in. You don't let them out. You keep pushing them back in. They can't get away from themselves. And it's not everybody who wants to deal with this.
No. It's scary. It can be scary.
But when you solve it, the game's fun.
Yeah.
And that's really what people want. They just want to have fun. I believe everybody, I mean, Naomi Osaka, right? She just wants to have fun.
Yeah.
But she can't right now because everything's too much. It's every shot is an affirmation of her as a person.
And despite us all not being pros, that resonates with a lot of players, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. So I mean, I wrote this book, right? And that was the point. The point of the book was it's really just a first principles look at the game, irreducible truths, right? And what I came to is that basically tennis is a contest to see who can hit the most balls in a rectangle. That's it, right? Stop me if you disagree. I mean, but so if there were judges involved giving style points, right? We could say it's about, technique. Like figure skating, like that's a 9, but it's not. It's just whether it goes in or doesn't go in. And nobody really approaches the game that way. And it's just, so the book was really just about, so I split the game into 2, right? Serving and it's 2 games in one really to me. And both of those games are serving is a meta skill, right? And returning is a meta skill. It's not just it doesn't matter how good your serve is necessarily if you're playing amongst equals, right? It's how well you play a serve game. And that has to do with understanding the game, right? Understanding the points. Like people will act as if hitting a down the line winner gets them more points than just putting a 10-ball rally. But it's not true, right?
Right.
And then it has to do with the geometry. So there's no technique in the book, but this is a book that I wish I had when I was 19 years old. Because if you read it, you'll understand the game better. And that makes you better immediately, not like in a month, immediately.
Yeah.
It's just the geometry. Right. And some thoughts about the game itself and then what we're training for, which is fun. I mean, that's all really people want to have. It's fun. It's all I want. It's all you and I want. We just go out there and hit the ball.
Yeah.
Right. It's not fun when you hit the ball super hard at me. But
sorry, that's really fun for me.
You hit the ball super hard sometimes.
That's fun. I don't know. I get, yeah, that is the definition of fun. I get trolled so much, and I shouldn't admit this out loud, but I get trolled so much by people on YouTube and everywhere else because I smile in playtest videos. And all I want to say to all you trolls out there is like, if you felt what it felt like to hit the ball as hard as I do sometimes, you would be smiling ear to ear.
And I can see it coming too. I'll lay one over there and your whole body changes. You get like, you're like, oh my God, here it comes.
Like that to me, like it's an indescribable feeling, but that is tennis. That is the fun of tennis. That's what keeps me coming back every day.
Yeah. And so that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean,
simple.
Yeah, really. It really is that simple. I mean, the rest of it is just, I guess it's maybe a little bit more fun, to play a way that you think you could play. But I really think if you release yourself from these expectations, it's just fun. It's just fun all the time.
Well, and it's been cool for me too. Again, coaching this like 11-year-old, she just picked up tennis within the year and she's got so much natural talent, but she's coming from a sport where she was judged on how things looked and she burnt out. And I can tell that she just loves tennis. So as I'm working with her, I don't ever want to put pressure on her where she's like, nope, I'm out. This isn't fun. And it's like, what do you want to do today? You want to play mini tennis for a half hour? Like, cool, let's play mini tennis and work on our hands. And like, let me show you this. And if she walks away smiling, happy, excited to come back again next week, then I feel like I've done my job because she's not getting burnt out. She's not being told, no, this is wrong. She's not being, and it's been a very interesting perspective in my head.
Yeah, no, it's a huge touchstone of coaching autonomy.
Yeah.
Letting the players have autonomy.
Yeah.
In their instruction and it's ownership is what it boils down to. And it makes, and so I think we're similar minded here, but the idea is that we're more like ambassadors for the game.
Yeah.
I have no interest in developing players. Player development is teaching people to turn play into work.
Yeah.
Right. That's why we can't develop players, because we ruin everybody. You look at all the attention. This is a funny one, right? You look at all the attention that goes into the top players. They don't need any attention. They're fine. The attention should go to the players that aren't doing so well, right? But that's not how we think about it. But as an ambassador, we just don't want to turn people off to the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we love it so much.
Right. The odds of anybody going on to do something, it's not even worth thinking about. But the odds of somebody having fun, it should be 100%.
Well, I don't want this one to go super long because I know we could make it super long. And again, it feels a little scattered, but like at the end of the day, I'm like, how do I even like attack? It feels so, there's so many stories. But I wanted to just give our listeners like a taste of what kind of conversations we can have. And even if someone listening has a question on how to handle a certain experience, we'd love to hear from you guys. So feel free to email podcast@tennis-warehouse.com. And Tim has this amazing website or blog. We can call it whatever you want to call it.
What would you call it? It's just like this. It's just like what we're doing right here.
It actually is just like this. You guys, it's so interesting. There's so many facets to your life. You update it very often. So it's very, there'll be times where I like pop up. I was like, oh, he updated it yesterday. And there's coaching and there's travel stories and tennis and life and just kind of perspective. I mean, you probably could speak to what all it is.
You got it. That's it. Just stuff, you think about it and I guess it's all similar in the sense that it's pretty heretical.
Yeah.
But it's honest. I mean, what I could say is it's not written to sell, and it's honest. It's how we, not just me, my family, my kids, we've challenged these long established narratives.
Yeah.
And found them to be severely lacking, honestly. And so we're, I talk about it a lot, but we gained everything by getting rid of everything. It's not the way you think it's going to go, but we gained so much through this trip, and we had nothing.
Yeah.
All I wanted was time with my family, right? If you think about a normal family, right? But briefly, like everybody separates every day to go make their living in ways unrelated to each other. this is what we were doing, right? And one of the things, it's a funny thing, but as I was giving CPR to my wife, I had these, like, I don't know how to describe them, but very profound realities became instantly obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one of them. Mm-hmm. That if we kept doing what we were doing in 20 years, I wouldn't know my kids. I probably wouldn't know my wife either if she survived, right? Because this is how we do it. And then the kids go to college and we think this is great. And I'm not saying it's not great. And I'm not saying I have anything figured out. But that's not why we had kids. We didn't have kids to, incur all the expenses, deal with them as teenagers. And then when they get cool, become become an inconvenience,
Yeah.
And so it just seemed obvious to me that we needed to come up with a way that we did it together. And so, like, here we're working, my kids, my boys are here together, cool. Right? We work together. They're 19 and 18 and me, and we get to work here. We have lunch together.
No, I love that.
Yeah. And so it's because of this, right? It's because we found a way to do this all together. And so we're much closer. And it's really everything I hope for, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. And I think we've kind of mentioned, or I've mentioned this with you also, is like, maybe this conversation does not resonate with everyone listening right now at all. But I
would know.
Yeah, there's some people that are like, whoa, that's wild. That's crazy. That's not me. But I know me personally, like, I'm very much like, everything happens for a reason. It's very like, just even me meeting you and being able to discuss, it's right. Like, I feel like, it's so cliche, but like every little thing that happened in your life to get you here at the same time that I'm here. And now we're, Drew happened to introduce us. It's just stuff like that just resonates with me. And I don't know, it all feels like we're all intertwined and there's something more. And like, we're all trying to be better versions of ourselves each day. And like, however we need to get there, whether it's on the tennis court or listening to podcasts.
And and we met through tennis.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It's again that
tennis connection.
Right. Yeah. And so the theme, I think you had one podcast I saw here is called The Tennis Life. The title of it was The Tennis Life.
Uh-huh.
Roy Barth, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's this theme. It's a tennis life, right? I mean, and this is through these things that it happens. And even for my kids who don't play a ton of tennis, right? They're involved in this current of tennis also.
It's like 1 degree of separation too. Once you're in it, it's wild.
Yeah, the tennis world's pretty small. Yeah,
it's pretty small. It's wild. Tell us the name of your book. Give us your website link, and we'll wrap it.
Okay. The book is called The Art of Holding Serve, and the website is Clunk Monkey. www.clunkmonkey. CLUNKMONKEY. How to spell that right?
We'll link it in the show notes too. I just remember when Drew was telling me about you, he's like, he has a website. It's called Clunk Monkey. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. And also, I should say, I'm not saying I'm right about anything. Right. So for those who think this is a little bit out there, I'm not saying I'm right. This was right for us. It worked for us. But I'm not saying that I have the keys to reality. Definitely
I don't think anyone has those keys, sir. But we'll be in search of them at least.
Never ending.
It's a never ending process and always fun conversations. And I do encourage anyone that's listening who is kind of like more, I guess, I don't know, I always feel left brained, likes to think things out, likes to be philosophical, less tactical, a little bit more like, let's process. Feel free to reach out to us and let us know how this episode, this chat resonated with you and like what kind of conversations you'd like to see us continue to have. And as it relates to your tennis game too, because that's kind of what we're getting into. There's a different way to play the sport and enjoy the sport. And it doesn't have to just be like making sure you have the most perfect forehand. So
no, fun. It's really who has the most fun wins. I think.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to pause us here and then look forward to recording more deep dives with you, Tim. But I do appreciate you sharing your story and getting super personal with us on the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. It was very, very nice.
Tim and I usually it's like 45-minute hit and then, I don't know, a conversation to follow. So we do the tennis and the physical side and then the mental side of it. So we'll have to set that up and then plan for another podcast.
Perfect.
Awesome. Okay. Well, everyone listening, thanks for listening and happy hitting.